Johnny Mac is here. He's got the latest on the Birds and the 49ers, all the NFL news and notes. But, John, I guess we'll start with the big NFL story from last night's miserable Thursday night game that everybody's talking about, probably going overboard on. But I'll get your take on it. I certainly don't think you had a dirty, malicious hit last night from Kiko Alonso. Your take on the hit that everybody seems to be talking about today?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, part of it is the year Kiko was here. I mean, he is the most laid-back NFL player I've ever seen. He's not the type that is going to predispose to go after anyone in that type of fashion. So I think the people that are claiming it was a dirty hit are way off base, completely off base. Is it an illegal hit? No question, under the rules. But people don't understand how difficult it is to pull up in these types of situations when you're playing at top speed, an NFL level game. And, you know, I compared it to a video game. It's everyone assumes you can hit up or down and immediately stop and peel off. That's not how it works in real life.
Yeah, and I think it's the optics of it, Josh. I mean, John, right? The guy's helmet goes flying off. He's got blood coming out of his ear. He looks like he's in a daze. His fingers up in the air like, where the heck am I? And we just assume that's dirty, that's malicious. He did it on purpose. But, you know, that's why I chose not to comment or say anything on it until the next day, because I wanted to see it again, sleep on it. And I said, you know what? If you watch the video, the guy's going for a first down. The first down marker's right there. If he pulls up, and how many times is you see a quarterback fake that slide and then go forward for the first down? If Alonso pulls up, he's getting criticized for not following through on the play.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I freely admit I err on the side of caution when it comes to defenders because they're asked to do an impossible job in today's environment. If you saw the hit last week, where Andros Sendejo got suspended for blowing up Mike Wallace. I mean, that was textbook. That's how they teach it. But you talk about the reaction and the fact that a player was hurt, almost the result defining the action. And that's not what should happen. And especially when you're taking that next step and trying to determine if something is dirty. Which, in that part of it, I think is absurd. There's no way, as I mentioned in my column, anyone who spent 10 minutes with Kiko Alonso knows he's not a dirty player, knows that wasn't his intent. Was an illegal hit by NFL rules? Yes. And he got a 15-yard penalty. He'll likely get fined. He'll probably get suspended. So he'll pay the price. But then to take the extra leap and say it was a dirty hit, I think that's so far off base, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, that's a good point. I brought that up in the opening statement today there, John, that Kiko being here for that year, I got a chance to talk to him a couple of times, and I can't see that guy having a malicious bone, man. He was just a laid-back, now, he plays hard, he plays fast, which is one of the reasons why the guy's always hurt, right, is because of the way he plays kind of reckless like that. But he's a pretty laid-back dude. I can't see him saying, you know what, my goal on this play was to run full speed and take Joe Flacco out by maliciously hit him. People have such a hard time understanding the instincts of these guys and how much greater they are than we as just the average Joe watching these games. The speed and the athleticism and all that they have going into that split second right there. And then how when the quarterback changes from standing upright to then sliding, how where the target changes. And that all happens in just a split second.
Yeah, and, everybody takes the screenshot and takes the GIFs and tries to frame it and say, look, this is how far he's away. And it is. As you said, Mike, it's a split second. And run the play at full speed, and you can imagine the reaction level of an NFL-level athlete, how quickly it happens. And Kiko afterwards said it was a bang-bang play. It was a bang-bang play, and people took that the wrong way. it's tough to be able to do things as a defensive player. And I thought it was, Eric Weddle, who's the Ravens all-pro safety, even he admitted it. He said they're trying to take it out of the game. It's part of football. You do your best you can. But he understands because he's in that position. And he could be doing the same thing to Matt Moore or a different quarterback.
Right.
So defenders kind of know, and they all say,
right.
Come on. It's certainly not, and that's where you have to bring in some of the history. If that's Ndamukong Suh, if that's Vontaze Burfict, you probably have a different take, and I think that's fair because people who have a consistent issue with it, but that's not Kiko Alonso. That's not even close to being Kiko Alonso.
No, and it's hard. Like, if you ask defensive players, of course they're going to tell you, what am I supposed to do? You really got to get the opinion of maybe other quarterbacks around the league because obviously they're going to stick up for Flacco and they're going to stick up for themselves. But if you get maybe, a retired quarterback or something, that says, look, you're out of the pocket. Flacco makes a late decision to slide because, John, what's his instincts? His instincts is that first down marker's right there. And then he realizes in that split second, I'm not making it. So what does he do? His instincts tell him to slide. So everything changes in that split second of what he wanted to do to what he ended up doing. Same thing with Alonso, and it makes the play look like you ended up seeing something that neither one of them anticipated happening. It all changed in a split second.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you're hurt and you're concussed, if you're a quarterback, you're not going to feel good at that particular play. And obviously, the center, Ryan Jensen, went after Kiko, and John Harbaugh was fired up. And I get that. They're trying to protect their players.
Heat of the moment.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. If you look at Aaron Rodgers, the Anthony Barr hit, that wasn't even an illegal hit. And the Packers were so fired up about that because it injured their all-pro quarterback. That's just the nature of it. So you can't really take that all that seriously as far as talking about whether something is dirty or not. It's a difficult game. It's a physical game. Guys are going to get hurt. And to assume that defensive players can stop on a dime and hit a specific target area, it's never going to happen. It's just never going to happen. And to paint players like Kiko Alonso as dirty, it's not helpful. It's not it's not realistic. Again, you're talking about a guy who has no history of this, who's certainly not going after Joe Flacco. And I think, after Joe recovers from this,
right.
and if you get him and ask him the question 4 or 5 weeks down the road, he'll admit to that.
Hey, John, I want to ask you about, we know the ratings. We all have our theories. You could certainly give yours if you'd like. And by the way, you could check out John's national column on Joe Flacco at 973ESPN.com, where he gives his further in-depth opinion on the hit from last night. Check out that column. Now you can find that column on our website, 973ESPN.com. And, John, another topic, which kind of ties into your other column with Mark Cuban, but furthering that, television executives have reportedly lobbied the NFL to cut back its Thursday night football package from 18 games back to 8 games, as well as moving the London game from the 9:30 slot to the 1 o'clock slot. So it sounds like that the TV executives, at least, believe that the ratings issue has to do with oversaturation rather than anything else.
Well, and I certainly think that's the biggest contributor. I've always thought that there is too much football. There's no need for the Thursday football. But it's easy to solve that problem if you're the network. Stop paying for it. And then it'll go away. As long as somebody's willing to cut that check, it's not going away. And to this point, we haven't gotten to that status of where people aren't willing to pay for it. And that's because if you look at television as a whole and you look at declining ratings for virtually everything, not just sports, but entertainment, and how that has eroded over the past number of years. The NFL has held up better than all of them. So from a network's perspective, they're trying to hang on to the one or two things that still is delivering solid ratings, even if they weren't as good as they once were. But there's no question oversaturation has contributed to it, and the Thursday night games are not necessary. And by the way, the players would be thrilled, and the coaches would be thrilled, because you would do away with short preparation weeks, except for Thanksgiving, which is always going to be here. I don't think it's necessary, but the bottom line is people are paying hundreds of millions of dollars for those games. So as long as they continue to do that, they're going to keep playing.
John, could they set it up where they could play Thursday night games with two teams coming off a bye? Could they do that and maybe alter the schedule in a way so that the two teams that have to play the Thursday night game have the extra time because they're coming off the bye?
Well, if you start doing things like that, you're going to have multiple bye weeks, and I'm not sure if that's good, because if you start talking about, for instance, giving teams 2 or even 3 bye weeks, that kind of, especially towards teams that aren't maybe doing that well, that could create some apathy and sort of unintended consequences, because you have these London games, which are another issue. As Mike mentioned, you basically have to give a team that goes to London a bye week after, and that's how the NFL goes about it. So if you start giving them bye weeks on Thursday night, you got to factor that in as well. And the London games are another example. They constantly talk about expanding that schedule. Ultimately, I think they're going to go to a full home schedule, which means 8 games in London. And then if they don't get a team over there, you might even say a complete season, 16 games with every team playing 1 game there in London. So that creates other issues. Hey, look, the league is always trying, like any business, though, and this is where I think Mark Cuban was off the base and off base. And if you think about it, guy's worth $3.3 billion. He owns a sports team in a different league that, by the way, also has eroding ratings and a skewing older viewership, the NBA, because every sport does. But Mark Cuban knows, hey, if there's a revenue stream, you're going to grab for it. And that's what the NFL is doing. So until those dry up, it's not going to change, whether it's London or the Thursday night games.
Yeah, you got the oversaturation thing, not to mention the oversaturation does what, John? It causes bad football. The Thursday night games are awful. The London games are typically bad. And a lot of the oversaturation is because they're putting teams that really don't deserve prime time situations. Like it or not, the game in London is a standalone game. So it's the only game people are seeing. The Thursday night game is a standalone game. So you're not, again, they've done a terrible job of giving you matchups that are compelling, save for a handful of games. I said, it's like you went to a restaurant 30 times and 28 times you had a lousy meal. You're not going to say, you know what, those 2 meals were really good. You're going to say, I got 28 lousy meals from that place.
Yeah, hey, look, the more national windows you have, obviously, the less impactful games you're going to have, because you can't have a marquee team that's playing well in every single national game. And if you do have that,
yeah.
For instance,
well, and that's part of the problem
playing.
too, is, John, because and the fact that they have marginalized the whole league. Everybody's mediocre, so you're not getting good matchups. You're not getting marquee matchups anymore because everybody's just average.
Yeah, I mean, parity, that's a double-edged sword, because you're right. When you have great teams, it tends to drive great ratings, and you'll certainly see that
right
when you do get to the AFC, NFC championship games or playoff games as a whole. You always see that. But then you have the other end of the spectrum, which is the longer you're in it, And if you're still relevant as far as the local ratings go, that's going to help improve that particular team's way it does in the ratings in the local fashion. So it kind of works in both ways. Generally, though, the more teams that have hope, the better off you are. And that's why that really is a Pete Rozelle thing. You have to go all the way back to Pete Rozelle, who, kind of wanted parity and wanted everybody to think they had a chance. I think at its core that's better than the opposite, but there's no doubt that great teams draw a lot of interest, and there really is no great team. You still have the reputation of the Patriots, which carries them. But, hey, Philadelphia Eagles are the best team in the NFL right now, and who saw that coming?
John McMullen with us here on the Sports Bash. John, let's get into the Eagles stuff real quick. And Eagles, obviously 49ers, have they resolved who's going to be at left tackle and who's going to be at right tackle when the Eagles line up against the Niners on Sunday?
Yeah, worst kept secret finally confirmed today, and Lane's going to stay on the right side, and Vitai's going to be on the left side. And I think it's a two-pronged decision, as I mentioned earlier in the week. Part of it is, you don't want to upset two positions instead of one, and then the second part is just the schedule this year and the way things have shaken out for the Eagles. Especially playing the AFC West and also the Dallas Cowboys and the breakout year that Lawrence is having. You have so many great pass rushers on the opposite side of where the traditional great pass rushers line up. So the Von Millers of the world, the Khalil Macks of the world, they all line up over the right tackle the vast majority of the time. So, hey, would you rather have Lane Johnson trying to block those guys or Vitai?
And John, Sal Powell said that he sees them slogging through this game. Might have used the word slog, too, based on what the weather forecast is. Do you see them trying to keep Carson safe and maybe utilizing a run-heavy game?
Well, if it's really bad and the rain it turns it into that type of game, you almost have to. You almost have to concern yourself with ball security. But there's a lot of coaches who believe a significant rain game really aids the passing attack, especially if you have a quarterback that can sort of cut through the weather. I think the Eagles believe they have that, and obviously if you don't have sure footing, it's better to be the receiver and to know where you're going as opposed to the defensive back. And then you have the 49ers to begin with. They're a terrible team. They're coming across country, which always hurts with West Coast teams to that early East Coast window.
And this is the third time, I think, in the last couple of weeks that they've come across the country.
Yeah, and that's always very difficult. Although, I often say you talk about we always talk about those things, and it's real. But, the Joe Montana 49ers didn't have a problem doing it. So generally, if you're a really, really good football team, that kind of stuff doesn't bother you. But obviously the 49ers aren't. Hey, there's always a concern for a letdown. I mean, it's human nature to look at this team and sort of say, this is a candy bar for us. And I think there will be some of that for the Eagles. And, if Brian Hoyer was under center, I might even be a tick concerned. But it's not going to be that way, and I think this is going to be a pretty easy game for the Eagles.
Yeah, that's a good point. The young quarterback back there, the Eagles really can get to them. You should figure a lot of mistakes, not to mention potentially really messy weather on Sunday. There hasn't been a lot of juice around this game. A lot of it's because San Francisco, quite frankly, is 0-7. But you see any classic letdown in this situation?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's human nature to let down in this type of environment. And to a certain degree, I think the Eagles will. I mean, they say they won't. Doug said today it's his job to make sure it doesn't happen. It's easy to say that, though. But we're all that way. I mean, we're all human beings, and if you know The team lining up outside of you is 0-7, and the Eagles obviously know that. They're playing a rookie quarterback. They're playing on the road. It is going to be bad weather. All of those things point to easy Eagles win, even with all the injuries. And, hey, people in that locker room, they talk the talk, and they say, no, we're not going to overlook them. But it's hard not to. And I think maybe you will see a slow start, but I think this team is so bad, especially with Beth at the quarterback, it doesn't matter if you have a slow start. Eventually, things will turn your way.
All right, John, Sunday, obviously at 1, you can listen to the game here on 97.3 ESPN. The Countdown to Kickoff show starts at 10 a.m. They'll be at McFadden's at the ballpark with plenty more on the Eagles and the 49ers. But, John, your pick is posted right now at 97.3ESPN.com. You can share with our listeners now who you're going with.
You guys got to share. I forget. I think it was 31-10. Is that correct? I had the Eagles running away with it.
Somewhere in that ballpark. I read it yesterday.
I'm calling it up while we're
I don't remember it. But somewhere in that range, 31-10, blowout city, he said.
That's because I'm not in front of my computer. As you can hear with the beeps going on
by the way.
in South Philadelphia.
All right, man. Well, we will hear you on Sunday, and check him out at JF McMullen on Twitter at the Eagles and 49ers on Sunday for all the latest. Thanks, pal.
All right, thank you, guys.